Hi, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to the show. As I promised you last week, the focus this week will be on financial services, more specifically, the impact that organizations like the EU and the OECD have had on that particular sector. And for that, I've invited the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Carl Bethel, QC, to the show. Minister, AG, welcome to the show.
Hello, Anthony, and Ace, as I know, I've known you for many years. Hello, Bahamas.
Thank you again for coming and talking to me. The Attorney General's office, before we get into financial services, because we're talking about laws that govern financial services. Tell me about the Office of the Attorney General.
We are the heart of governance. Decisions are taken in cabinet or in different ministries. They create legal relations. We have to oversee all of them, draw contracts. If the government wants to honor somebody, we have to do the instruments of appointments. If a judge is appointed, we have to draft the instruments of appointments. Everything that goes on in government requires some law behind it. Because
we are a country of laws.
And we are governed by a constitution and laws. And so, yes, if a department wants to do so much as to rent a shack, we have to work on the lease.
Yeah, so to make sure it fits all the legal parameters.
Yeah, everything that goes on in government has some aspect where, at some point, you will find officials from my ministry, trained lawyers, pulling it together.
Now, financial services, again, lots of laws to regulate that sector.
Yes.
From your dealings with that sector, and we all agree, it's nothing like it was in the glory days of financial services. How would you describe that sector today?
Unfortunately, the sector is facing some very great challenges. It does appear to me, it has appeared to me, and I think to many commentators since the year 2000, when this first started, that there has been a targeted effort by the international community, the big countries in the world, to really put small, little offshore financial sectors out of business or in their place.
Feeding off of that, 6-year period, central bank says between 2012 2017, that sector lost 650 jobs. It's about 113 jobs a year. That's a lot of jobs.
Yes,
you think is it likely that we'll ever be able to replace those jobs?
Let me say that every job lost is a blow to our middle class, the standard of living in this country, and so it's a matter to be lamented and a matter to be seriously addressed. The first thing we have to do is we have to be smarter than them.
Yeah.
We have for too long been reacting behind the goalpost, waiting for somebody to put a stick to our back or some other implement to our head before we move. That has to stop.
Yeah.
That's the first thing we need to do.
Yeah. We agree the sector is contracted. Yes. And this may be more in the Minister of Finance's bailiwick, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What kind of contribution to the GDP you expect from that sector this year, given the circumstances that presently prevail?
Historically, the financial sector has contributed on average between 15 and 20% of gross domestic product every year. This year, I would anticipate that it would pretty much hold constant, but as the recent changes come into play and the sector has to adjust to those changes, in future years there may be some further contraction. It's unavoidable until the sector is repositioned in the global system.
I mentioned the OECD and the EU in my introduction. They've not helped. Obviously, they've hurt the sector. Is this a new normal that we got to get used to this?
I think that we have to get used to the fact that the 30 or 40 so major economies in this world, major countries, have decided that it's no longer an option for their taxes to be lost due to differences in the tax structure of other countries and to the ability of businesses to have production in one country but book their profits in another. So that has been attacked, and that has been a major aspect of what they call the BEPS initiative, base erosion and profit shifting.
They want to keep all that money at home, which is understandable.
Well, they say that if you're doing the production and if you have the factory in Europe,
right,
and the work is being done in Europe, and the workers need to get there on roads or trains or buses or go to the hospital, why should the profits of that effort be booked in a third country where no taxes are paid to the home jurisdiction? That's their argument.
And we are considered more of a threat than most people?
Well,
the Bahamas? Why are we such a big threat?
That's not only the Bahamas. There are 13 offshore jurisdictions, some of them being dependencies or territories of Great Britain. I think the majority, 6 of them. And then some others of Holland, etc. And then there are a few independent countries in that part as well, small Caribbean countries. And they are the targets of this initiative at the present time, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Although it's phrased as a global initiative for this inclusive forum with over 100 countries, the real target of the initiative are those 13 or so jurisdictions.
All of this ordeal, we have to call it, began about 19 years ago, 2000. Talked about that.
Yes.
Why have successive governments not been able to get their arms around this challenge that these organizations have?
Part of the big problem is these organizations keep changing the rules. It's called shifting the goalposts. So we surmounted the problems in 2000 with the FATF. And up until 2014, we were in good standing. In 2014, they shifted the rules. They said they were no longer looking strictly at what they call technical compliance, how many of 40 recommendations you were compliant in. They added 11 new factors called immediate outcomes, which deal with how you implement your laws.
So passing laws...
They changed the rules.
Yeah, they changed the rules,
right.
Meaning passing laws was no longer good enough. You had to convince them...
You had to convince them that your laws were being effectively implemented. And the new rules say that we want to know, like, for example, how many on-site visits did your securities regulator make to its licensees in the securities industry?
Stick a pin, because I want to follow up and take you further with that.
Right,
but
that's a detail.
Yeah, but we got to take a break and we'll be back with more after this short break. Welcome back to the show. Speaking with the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Carl Bethel. We're talking about OECD, EU, talking about how many visits. That means all of the local people involved in the sector have got to undergo some training.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, in fact, one of the immediate outcomes that was imposed since 2014, specifically dealing with training of your regulators, training of the supervisors, training of frontline staff in major financial institutions, training of everybody involved in any way, law enforcement, training of prosecutors, training of the judiciary to sensitize them to all of these concerns. I think we need to clearly separate. There are 3 major initiatives right now.
Okay.
One is the FATF thing that I spoke about. That's one with the training and the supervisors. The other is the BEPS initiative. That goes towards what happens with IBCs, how they're used, and whether the taxes are booked in the Bahamas or paid at home.
The international business
Right.
companies.
And the third is this late thing where the European Union commissioners, tacking on to the FATF, have put the Bahamas on an adverse list, an advisory. Not a blacklist, but an advisory. So there are three challenges we face now.
Okay. How do you get to them? Which one do you take on first? Do you have to take on all of them at the same time?
All at the same time. All are equally threatening. All are in their own ways very complex matters to deal with. But the critical one right now is the BEPS. That is when we passed all those laws in December to bring in substance requirements. This goes to the old issue that the Europeans have, that people will have factories in their country with workers working, but the taxes are booked in a low or no tax jurisdiction. So they're not getting the benefit of tax for the people who they have to provide hospitals and roads for, and police protection. So that is the BEPS, that is aimed at that, taking that business from the Bahamas and other offshore territories and bringing that business home.
You meaning the government, all governments, you've been passing laws forever. What other laws do you have to pass now to at least keep up with these new conditions they've imposed?
It changes all the time. The goalposts continually shift, or new things are added in to the package. So just last week, the Financial Action Task Force has added in regulation of cryptocurrency offerings. So you may have heard about Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right. And all of these virtual assets. Well, the whole world has been advised, meaning instructed, to bring in laws to regulate that sector. Now, there are only, I think, two countries, one closest to us being Malta, that has, closest to us in terms of our law, that has a law to regulate. Virtually no country in Europe has it. So we're looking at the Maltese law because we want to stay ahead of the game. We're tired of being in the position where we lag behind the world and someone has to come over to switch on our back to make us do something.
Which means all those very intelligent, capable people in your department, ministry,
yes,
and the ones you're going to have to hire to focus on staying
yes,
ahead of the curve.
Indeed.
Prime Minister recently, I think you on that trip as well, went to Brussels. What changed?
Well, can I explain? That was the BEPS initiative. That was that was the laws that we had passed. After we'd passed the laws in December, we sent them to Brussels, and they went through a process where they evaluated our laws and compared them to laws passed by 13 or so other jurisdictions who were under the same mandates. Then they stopped talking to us. And so immediately,
nobody explained why.
Nobody explained why. They stopped talking. They were going through their own evaluation and they'd sent it to their ministers. They were waiting feedback from their ministers. But we have experience with Europe. When they stop talking to you,
watch out.
You need to watch out. So on that note, as soon as that became apparent that we weren't hearing anything, the Prime Minister intervened. He took management of it, and we went over to Europe and we had a meeting with the Director General responsible for the Tax and Customs Union in the EU. And as a result of that meeting, everybody started talking again.
Okay.
And they extended time for some areas where we were too far ahead, some areas where we were lagging behind the region for correction, not only for us, but for 7 other countries. But the point was, the dialogue was reestablished immediately after that. And so we're feeling pretty good. We've done all of the last minute changes that we undertook to do. We have submitted them. We're waiting to see how things will work out.
But they put us on a list anyway.
No, it's not them. It's the European Commissioners, which is a separate undertaking.
Explain that. Because everybody, a lot of Bahamians think.
Yes, the opposition who knows better put this point out, and they knew that it was mischievous.
So explain.
The Prime Minister went to Brussels to deal with the BEPS initiative. As a result of that, we made some changes to our law before the 24th of February. That was all gazetted and sent forward. We are waiting what the decision is from the European Ministers of Finance on that. Okay. We found out on the 28th of January, A note had been sent on the 21st of January to Foreign Affairs. We found out in my office on the 28th, and the panic buttons went on, that the EU commissioners, in a separate initiative, had decided that they were going to put the Bahamas on this adverse listing. It was not a blacklist, it is an enhanced advisory. In response to that, I went to show them the extent to which we had progressed. They tagged it all onto what happened with the FATF in October 2018, when the FATF put us on an action plan. These are very technical terms. What it meant was they put us on a grey list, in short. As a result of that grey list, the United States, our best friend, our bestest friend, was the first to issue an advisory together with the UK against the Bahamas. But they didn't put us on a list. It was an advisory for enhanced due diligence for transactions coming out of the Bahamas because of what the FATF had done. The EU are simply doing the same thing in response to a directive that came from the European Parliament up to the commissioners.
My cousin, who lives in Montel Heights,
yes,
wants to know,
know,
how does that impact him?
It's difficult for even Bahamians working in the financial sector, as well as non-Bahamians, to really understand the complexities of these different initiatives. And it is our failure as a nation over the years to understand the complexities of what is being done that has led us so often to fail to do what was necessary to avoid these listings.
Let me ask you something. We have a new ambassador to the EU?
Which is another area where successive governments dropped the ball. Thank the Lord that this government, under the Honorable Hubert Minnis, saw the wisdom of finally appointing an ambassador to the European Union countries, which would then be the head of mission to the European Union. So Miss Maria O'Brien, will be our first ambassador who will be head of mission to the European Union. The European Union is not a country, it's a bloc. So she will then be accredited as ambassador to all of the 28 countries in the European Union, one after the other. But she'll be head of mission to the European Union as a bloc.
Got to talk some more about that a little bit more before we come to the end of this, because we are coming to the end of it, but we got to take another break, and we'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to the show. Anthony Newbold speaking with the Attorney General. We were talking about the fact that there's now a Bahamian ambassador to the European Union.
Yes.
What will that do for us in terms of, well, you tell me, because I'm thinking this is somebody who is on the ground, and before all these things happen, this is somebody talking to members of that union to give us a heads up. Is that a correct position? Yes, but
bear in mind that most of these initiatives are very technical, and they're run by civil servant persons who are down to the minutiae and the words. And so that office, that embassy, will be fully staffed with trained Foreign Service officers who will go out and meet all the people. You know, Paul Adley once said, while you're shaking the minister's hand and he's sympathetically agreeing with you, there's someone on the 5th floor who's writing the obituary for your country. Well, we're going to have Foreign Service officers there to link up with those persons who you never would know, the minister would never know, and get to see what is happening before it's publicly announced. Then we're able to prepare for it. Then we're able to, really anticipate the next move and prepare for it.
Right. In as clear a layman's language as you could possibly muster, what do these listings mean for us in the Bahamas?
Well, you'd understand that if they put a gunboat outside Nassau Harbor and say there's going to be a tax of $100 on every pallet of shipping coming in or going out of the Bahamas. What the listings do is they tell their banks, first of all, you must de-risk from high-risk jurisdiction. If they put you on a list that declares you to be high risk, you tend to find banks refusing to do business automatically with any banks, particularly offshore banks in the country. That puts pressure on everybody. It affects their ability to stay in business if they can't conduct business with major countries abroad. So it is a very threatening and dangerous thing. But it's bad for Bahamians too, because the same due diligence will affect if you want to send $200 to your child in college in London, or if you want to send money to your child in Canada. You could have the same level of scrutiny, and it could cost more. So it is a hostile act when they put you on a blacklist, and it does have real economic impact, and it does affect employment in this country. And so it's important to stay off these lists.
I would say so. You said earlier, the goalposts continue to change, and they will probably continue to change, but we're going to have to keep trying to adapt because it's their pawn we're trying to play in.
Well, you see, the OECD is based in France and in Europe, even though it's international. So the placement of an ambassador to the European Union in Brussels, 1 hour by train away from Paris,
Yes.
is critically important. Because not that the ambassador is going to be running all over the place, but all of those foreign service officers we have there will be down in the OECD meeting the officials, the mid-level officials, forming friendships, forming business, not that they're working, but connections by giving them their card, getting their card, opening dialogue.
Yeah.
And the Bahamas will, I think, be better placed going forward to anticipate and to meet further challenges.
And these words have been thrown around since 2000, corruption, money laundering, drug trafficking. Someone says, red herrings, this is just about competition.
Well, all I could say is there's an aspect of competition that, in my view, clearly is related to the BEPS initiative. That's to do with substance. I've gone through this already. The Financial Action Task Force, however, is concerned with anti-corruption, monies, money laundering, terrorist financing, and the list on that continues to grow. As I said, the latest thing now is they want regulation of virtual currencies because that's a threat to the financial system. They are genuinely concerned, although I think their emphasis on terrorism is a little over-exaggerated. The fact of the matter is that even the 9/11, it was a small amount of money that went through religious charities. And a lot of the terrorism that they've been experiencing is low-level, asymmetric terrorism, individuals with trucks driving into crowds. But it is still a major emphasis for them, terrorist financing. So that's a genuine emphasis, although I think a little misplaced. They're genuinely after proliferation of nuclear weapons, biological weapons, because these things are traded on the black market all over the world. I think that's a genuine effort. We just have not kept pace.
We haven't kept pace.
Yes.
And which brings me to a point that I think we can agree on, and that is we are just going to have to, as a country, continue to reinvent ourselves when it comes to, certainly when it comes to financial services.
No question of that. But you see, the Bahamas, traditionally, when we have made up our mind to do something, we've always excelled. The important thing now is to not wait for someone to hit you with a switch, to anticipate, to get ahead of the game. That is the strategy now. Let's get ahead of this game. Okay, so now we know about virtual currency being an issue. Let's not wait until they make it an absolute mandate. We're already looking at laws. We're already looking at the legislation. I've already instructed my draftspersons to start drafting laws to keep the Bahamas ahead of the game.
Good. And I was going to, let me say this. Financial services, whatever else happens, will always be anchored by banks. Because my next question was, is it time to look at creating another financial services entity stream we've got the virtual currency. I'm thinking, what happens with cooperatives? Is that another, I don't know.
Let me say that the financial sector is always evolving. As new technologies come on stream, the ability to do this, that, or the other changes with the technology. So, for example, you've seen great retrenchment in the staffing levels required by commercial banks. So even without any pressures from Europe or the OECD, if you look at, for example, the Royal Bank of Canada, who have aggressively moved into a digital base for their banking, other banks took a more long-term, slower approach, but started earlier. So Scotiabank has a much more reactive, responsive digital platform that I found with Royal Bank. But changes in technology have led to losses in employment in these institutions and the loss of civility, I think, in terms of the way customers are treated. Yeah. And the changing of rules without consultation, just this is going to be the way. If you bring a check from this place or that place, you know what it is. It's been a terrible situation over the last several years with several of the banks that have moved from traditional banking practices to try to become more online.
Bottom line is,
things change.
We're going to have a financial services sector, but we're going to have to keep adapting because that's the only way we're going to survive.
Because things change. Things change either based on changes in technology that will force changes, or they change because of changes in the global mindset. In either case, we as a people have to be prepared to rise to the challenge. Part of that is forewarned is forearmed. And that is why the placement of an ambassador in Europe is a long-awaited and highly to be praised decision by this government.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. And thank you for watching A Closer Look. We've been talking financial services and the Office of the Attorney General with the Attorney General. Join us again next week as we explore further into the Prime Minister's National Address on A Closer Look.